Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Hello.
Today we're plunging into a spiritual world so richly fascinating it remains, well, utterly unique in the history of human religion, ancient Egypt.
Indeed, and we're looking at quite a trove of sources, everything from the early religious writings like the pyramid texts, carved inside royal tombs.
Amazing texts.
To temple walls, reliefs, hymns, and even simple artifacts found in, ordinary ancient homes. We're trying to uncover the character of Egyptian religion, which could be quite mysterious, yet also remarkably present in daily life.
And our mission today really is to cut through some of that complexity. We want to give you a shortcut to understanding how these gods and goddesses didn't just exist alongside ancient Egypt, but permeated every aspect of its civilization. We'll uncover some, frankly, surprising facts about their nature, their dynamic relationships, and their really enduring legacy.
Yeah.
You might just find yourself asking, are these ancient echoes still shaping our understanding of the divine today?
It's a great question to keep in mind.
So our first stop on this deep dive has to be the very definition of God for the Egyptians, because, well, it's wildly different from our own, isn't it?
It really is.
What did they even mean when they said God?
It's a fantastic place to start, because the Egyptian word netcher, that's N-E-T-C-H-E-R, it encompassed a far wider range of meanings than our English word God.
Wider how?
Well, think of it almost like if our word spirit could also apply to a deified human hero, or a mythical beast like the Sphinx, or even the actual hieroglyphs of a sacred text.
Wait, the letters themselves could be netcher?
Yes, sometimes. Even hieroglyphs were regarded as netcher. It's this really all-encompassing concept. That's a crucial first aha moment, I think.
Okay, that immediately expands the canvas. And their physical forms, they were incredibly diverse too, right? Not just what we typically imagine as human figures.
You've hit on a key point there. Yeah, Egyptian deities appeared in, well, manifold ways. They could be fully human. We call that anthropomorphic, or entirely animal zoomorphic, or, and this is very common, a hybrid form, often referred to as bimorphic.
Bimorphic, so like a mix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That might mean a human head on an animal body, or, an animal head on a human body. Think of Hathor. She could be shown as a full cow.
Right.
But also as a woman with cow horns and a sun disk between them. Or the sun god Re. He might appear as a falcon, or as a man with a falcon's head.
Oh, okay.
It was actually quite rare, interestingly, for a single deity to be found in all three forms, human, animal, and hybrid simultaneously.
So you might see the god of wisdom, Thoth, as, say, a baboon or an ibis.
Precisely.
And Amun, the great Theban god, could be a ram or a goose. It sounds like there was immense flexibility in how the divine could manifest.
There was, and it really speaks to their dynamic nature. Sometimes their character even seemed, well, ambivalent.
Ambivalent, like unpredictable.
Sort of. Take the goddess Bastet. She could appear as a graceful sort of domestic house cat.
The protector of the home, yeah.
But also as a ferocious lioness, ready to strike. It makes you wonder, were certain deities worshipped despite their potential hostility?
That's a good point. Fear and reverence mixed.
Perhaps. They certainly weren't static, distant figures. Texts show they were believed to speak, to cry out in despair, even exhibit anger, sadness, and humor. They had distinct personalities, flaws, and all.
Fascinating. Okay, and what about this idea I've read about one god as many, or many gods as one? It sounds almost paradoxical from our modern perspective.
It does, but what's really interesting here is how easily the Egyptians embraced multiplicity. A god like Amun, for instance, was called Amun rich in names, precisely because he had so many manifestations.
So different aspects of the same god.
Exactly. Or sometimes one deity was seen as the Ba, that's B-A, often translated as soul or manifest form of another, like the ram-headed god Kum being called the Ba of Re, or sometimes the Ba of Osiris.
So not quite separate gods, but manifestations.
Precisely. It wasn't necessarily about distinct separate deities in these cases, but about a single underlying god or goddess manifesting in diverse ways, like different facets of a single diamond, perhaps.
And that concept is strongly tied to syncretism, isn't it? Where different deities are essentially combined.
Yes, exactly. Syncretism. This linking of names, like Adum Khepri or the very famous Amun-Ra, was incredibly common.
Right.
Some syncretisms were fairly straightforward combinations of similar deities, or even to different aspects of the same god. Adum Khepri, for example, combines the evening sun, Adam, and the morning rising sun, Khepri.
Okay, that makes sense.
But as the Egyptologist Eric Horning pointed out, proper syncretism wasn't about sort of dissolving identities into one another. It was about enriching them. It often created a new third god that was actually more than the sum of his parts. It shows a very fluid, adaptive theological system.
So with all this fluidity and multiplicity in different forms, were there ever contradictory stories about how the world and the gods actually came to be? Did the Egyptians have a single definitive creation myth?
Not really, no, which might surprise you. Egyptian texts, especially from later periods, contain many clear, yet often seemingly contradictory accounts of mythic genesis, how things began, and the rule of the cosmos.
So multiple versions.
Yes. For a long time, scholars just assumed these reflected conflicting traditions from different major cult centers like Heliopolis versus Hermopolis versus Memphis.
But that view has changed.
Somewhat. More recently, many scholars feel these accounts might simply be different aspects or interpretations of an underlying shared understanding, suggesting maybe more commonality than initially apparent.
Interesting.
There was no single unified creation myth that everyone agreed on, but certain core elements do tend to occur.
Okay, that's a great insight into how scholarship evolves. So let's unpack some of these diverse creation stories. How did the Hermopolitan view work from Hermopolis?
Right, Hermopolis. They developed a myth of creation centered on 8 original deities. This group is known as the Ogdoad.
The Ogdoad, the 8.
Exactly. These were 4 male and 4 female pairs, and they represented the inert, sort of passive aspects of the pre-creation cosmos.
Like what?
You had Nun and Nanit, representing primeval water, He and Hahet for infinity or endlessness, Kek and Kekate for darkness, and Amun and Amonit for hiddenness or concealed power.
So abstract concepts almost.
Pretty much. While they were inert, they contained the potential for creation. And their names are grammatically masculine and feminine, which reflects the idea of creation happening through a kind of sexual union and birth. This myth is ancient, goes back to at least the Old Kingdom, maybe the 5th dynasty. It gives a deep glimpse into their earliest cosmological thoughts.
And these Ogdoad deities, they were seen as the parents of the sun god, is that right?
Yes, that's how they were often framed. They were considered the fathers and mothers of the sun god.
Yeah.
In the Hermopolitan view, the sun god was the focal point of ongoing creation.
And how did that first creation event happen?
The Egyptians often pictured it like this: a primeval mound of earth, often associated with a god named Tatanen, emerges from the primordial waters.
Like the land appearing after the Nile flood recedes.
Exactly like that. It's an image drawn right from their environment. Then, a lotus flower, linked to the god Nefertum, rises from these waters, or from the mound itself.
Okay.
And from that lotus, the young sun god emerges, bringing light and kickstarting all further creation. It's a really powerful image of life emerging from watery chaos.
It really is. So what about the Heliopolitan creation myth? From Heliopolis, the city of the sun, how did that version differ?
Well, in the Heliopolitan cosmogony, the sun god Adam was the solitary creator. He wasn't born from others, he was he who came into being of himself, self-created.
Wow. Okay, and how did he create others?
Through an act of self-copulation, often depicted metaphorically, maybe with his hand personifying the female principle. From this act, he produced the first divine pair, Shu, the god of air.
Air, okay.
And Tefnut, the goddess of moisture.
Air and moisture, and then the divine family tree just kept growing from there.
Exactly. Shu and Tefnut, in turn, produced Geb, who became the earth.
Geb, the earth.
And Nut, the sky. They took their respective places, often shown with Shu holding Nut, sky above the earth.
Right, I've seen those depictions.
Then Geb and Nut brought forth the next generation: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. These are really key figures in Egyptian mythology.
The main players, almost.
Pretty much. And often, Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis and intimately linked to kingship, was added to this group. This completes the key elements of the Egyptian universe and connects divine creation directly to societal structures, especially the pharaoh.
So it all flows from Adam.
Ultimately, yes. All these aspects were seen as extensions of a sun god's original act of coming into being. There were even charming variants, like a Middle Kingdom text saying the creator god, the Abi Lord, brought forth gods from his sweat and humans from his tear.
What, and tears?
Yeah. These different stories weren't necessarily seen as wrong if they differed, but more like varied lenses, exploring the nature of the creator deities and the basis of their immense power.
Okay, so these gods were incredibly powerful, creating the world and everything in it. But here's an idea that really flips our modern concept of divinity on its head. Were they actually immortal?
That's a truly important question. And the surprising answer is, well, not in the way we typically understand immortality.
Really? Not immortal?
It's one of the great ironies, perhaps, of ancient Egyptian religion. Despite their divinity, the gods were not considered immune to vulnerability, to weakness, even to, well, death.
How so?
As they became more human-like in their depictions and stories anthropomorphized, they increasingly took on the weaknesses and limitations of their human subjects.
You mean they could actually die? Like Osiris, he was famously murdered, wasn't he?
Precisely. Osiris is the prime example. While Egyptian texts often avoid explicitly saying Osiris died likely for magical or ritual reasons, to avoid making the god's death too real in that context.
Right, the power of words.
Exactly. But the myths clearly show he was slain by his brother Seth, then mummified and buried. This is absolutely central to his mythology.
Okay, what about other gods?
Well, the great sun god Re was also thought to grow old each day, becoming weak and senile, and effectively die each night as he entered the underworld.
Only to be reborn at dawn.
Exactly, resurrected at dawn. This concept becomes most explicit in later texts from the Ptolemaic period, but it was certainly hinted at earlier and is found depicted in New Kingdom royal tombs. Even the really ancient cannibal hymn from the pyramid texts seems to imply the gods could die and be consumed.
Wow, but they would be reborn, right? It wasn't a final, absolute end.
Not in the sense of a complete cessation of existence, no. The Egyptians had these two concepts of time and eternity. Jet, which is sort of linear, enduring continuity.
Okay.
And Nehe, which is more about eternal recurrence, the endless cycles like the sun's journey or the seasons.
Jet and Nehe.
Right. And as Eric Horning stressed, the very mortality of Egyptian gods enables them to become young again and again, and to escape from the disintegration that is the inevitable product of time. They could die and still remain within Nehe, the ongoing progression of cyclical time. It's a very different way of thinking about divinity and eternity.
Okay, so they could die and be reborn within the cycle, but was there an ultimate end envisioned, a true end of days for the gods themselves?
Yes. Ultimately, it seems a final end did await the gods. Egyptian mythology makes it pretty clear that in the very distant future, only the primordial elements from which the world originally arose would eventually remain.
So a return to the beginning.
Essentially, yes. There's an important section in the coffin texts, those ancient funeral texts written on sarcophagi, where the creator god Adam states that after millions and millions of years, he and Osiris would dissolve and return to one place, back to the undifferentiated, formless condition of the primordial waters that prevailed before creation.
Back to Nun and Nanette.
Pretty much. The Book of the Dead, another collection of funerary spells, describes this end of days even more clearly in a dialogue between Adam and Osiris. Adam comforts Osiris by pointing out that in the end, only the primordial waters would remain. Everything else would cease.
That's quite profound.
It is.
Yeah.
And some cult sites, like Luxor and parts of Thebes, were even venerated as tombs of the gods. From the Egyptian perspective, life emerged from death just as surely as death followed life. And the gods, even in their immense power, were not exempt from this grand cosmic cycle.
This inherent vulnerability, this cycle, it brings us to a really fascinating debate among Egyptologists. Was ancient Egyptian religion always polytheistic, with many gods?
Yeah.
Or were there trends towards monotheism, the worship of a single god?
Ah, yes, the polytheism versus monotheism debate. It truly raged for years, decades even, and isn't entirely settled today, although the consensus has shifted.
How so?
Well, some early scholars, like Hermann Juncker back in the day, even suggested Egyptian religion was originally monotheistic and later sort of degenerated into separate cults worshiping different aspects of the one god.
But that idea isn't really accepted now.
No, that specific idea has largely been discarded by modern scholarship. However, other scholars certainly observed what looked like a gradual development of monotheistic ways of thought over time.
Especially with certain gods becoming dominant.
Exactly. With the successive preeminent deities like Re in the Old Kingdom, then Osiris rising in importance, and especially Amun in the New Kingdom, it seemed like a drift towards focusing on one supreme deity.
So how did other leading scholars, like Eric Hornung, whom you mentioned earlier, interpret this trend? Did he see it as a move towards one god?
Horning largely disagreed that it represented true monotheism, certainly not before Akhenaten. He argued, as we touched on, that the Egyptian word necher was a general term, applicable to any deity, almost meaning whichever god you wish, in some contexts. So from his perspective, the various expressions of syncretism like Amun-Ra or one deity indwelling another didn't necessarily indicate a move towards monotheism.
What did it indicate then?
He and many others would classify it more as henotheism. That's where worshippers might venerate one god above all others, making them supreme in their personal worship or in the state cult.
But still acknowledging other gods exist.
Precisely. Other gods still exist and are valid, they just aren't the focus for that particular person or time. It's a subtle but really crucial difference from strict monotheism, where only one god exists, period.
Got it. Henotheism. Okay, but then we have Akhenaten. His worship of the Aten sun disk is often cited as true monotheism, right? What was so revolutionary about his approach?
Akhenaten. Yes, his religion is indeed one of the most complex and frankly controversial aspects of ancient Egyptian belief. James Henry Breasted, a very prominent early 20th century Egyptologist, definitely saw Akhenaten's attempt to largely replace the traditional gods with the exclusive worship of the solar disk, the Aten, as a genuine form of monotheism. The first in history, he argued.
And how do more recent scholars see it? Like Jan Assmann.
Jan Assmann, another hugely influential scholar, offered a useful framework. He characterized the traditional Egyptian understanding of the one and the many through two viewpoints. First generation, where the one produces the many, like in the creation accounts we discussed.
Right, Adam creating Shu and Tefnut.
Exactly. And second, emanation, where the one is somehow present in the many, like in syncretism, where Amun is Re and Amun-Ra.
Okay, generation and emanation. And Akhenaten's Atonism fit one of these.
Yes, but only one. In Akhenaten's religion, according to Assmann and others, the concept of emanation was conspicuously absent. The Aten didn't manifest in other gods. It was solely through generation that the Aten recreated the world daily. While the Aten was visible and immanent in creation through its life-giving rays, it also transcended creation. It didn't merge with other gods. This fits the characteristics of what we generally call true monotheism.
So the exclusivity was key.
That's what many argue now. James P. Allen, for instance, suggested a powerful synthesis, stressing that what was truly radical about Akhenaten's theology wasn't simply the oneness of God. Egyptians had concepts of a supreme god before, but his insistence on exclusivity. Other gods weren't just secondary, they were largely rejected.
So the Aten was unique in that Akhenaten actively suppressed the worship of other gods, especially Amun. That was the really unprecedented dream.
Precisely. The Aten itself, the physical disk of the sun, the source of light and life, actually predated Akhenaten. It even appeared as a kind of war god under Thutmose IV.
Oh, interesting.
And Akhenaten's own father, Amenhotep III, significantly encouraged Aten worship alongside Amun and others. But under Akhenaten, who was originally Amenhotep IV, the Aten rose to be a universal and almost exclusive deity.
Almost exclusive.
Well, he and his wife Nefertiti served the god directly, claiming unique, true knowledge of the god only for themselves. The high priest of the Aten was even called the priest of Akhenaten, essentially making the king a barrier between other priests and the god.
Wow.
And while he actively suppressed the cults of major gods like Amun, scraping their names off monuments, some other divine concepts like Mot, truth, order, and Shu, air, perhaps seen as an extension of the Aten's light, were initially tolerated or accepted, though even this acceptance seemed to be restricted later in his reign. This divorce from traditional Egyptian polytheism was a significant, revolutionary, albeit ultimately short-lived shift.
Okay, so that covers the complex nature of the gods and the debates around monotheism. Now, how did these gods, whether one or many, actually interact with everyday Egyptians? Were they accessible or were they distant, aloof figures mainly dealt with by priests and kings?
That's a great question. Unlike, say, the Greek gods, who often seem to mingle quite freely and messily with mortals in their myths.
Right, Zeus was always getting into trouble.
Exactly. Egyptian deities generally didn't readily mix with their human subjects in the same way. Their interaction was usually confined to specific, quite highly formalized contexts, and the primary context was the temple.
The temple, so from simple shrines to huge complexes like Karnak?
Yes, exactly. From simple reed huts in early times to those towering, magnificent stone structures later on, temples were the absolute focal points of Egyptian society, religiously, economically, and politically.
So what actually happened inside these temples? Was it a place for public worship as we might understand it today?
Not quite in the way we think of congregational worship. Temple service, the meticulous daily care of the god statue residing within the inner sanctuary, was paramount. This wasn't just seen as a religious obligation. He was considered essential for the very continuation of cosmic order, for existence itself.
So highly ritualized then.
Extremely. It involved large-scale magico-religious rituals. There were the daily rituals, waking the god, cleansing, clothing, feeding the statue. Then there were major festival rituals.
Like carrying the god out.
Yes, sometimes. Or like carrying statues of deities up to the temple roof on New Year's Day, an event called the Birth of Re, to unite the statue with the actual rising sun for a kind of shared rebirth and renewal of power.
Wow.
And there were also non-regular rituals performed for special circumstances, like coronations or dealing with crises. Tempered depictions of these rituals, however, tend to be idealized.
How so?
They usually show only the king performing the ritual before the deity, acting as the sole intermediary. That was the ideal, but the reality involved ranks of priests carrying out these complex ceremonies. Many aspects of these rituals were deliberately kept secret, referred to as mysteries or shaitao, implying a hidden, sacred knowledge only accessible to initiates.
And ordinary people could bring gifts too, right? Offerings.
Yes, absolutely. While the inner sanctuaries were restricted, the outer courts and festival appearances were more accessible. Pious visitors would donate perishable offerings, food, drink, flowers, and non-perishable gifts, ranging from simple pottery trinkets to finely carved statues of themselves praying, hoping to remain perpetually in the god's presence.
And royal gifts must have been huge.
Prodigious. King's gifts were particularly lavish, intended to ensure divine favor for the entire land on a grand scale. And yes, on special occasions, images of the gods were placed in portable shrines like model boats or barks, and carried in grand processions outside the temple walls, often visiting other temples. This signified a temporary divine journey or occupancy.
It still sounds very formal, maybe a bit removed from the concerns of daily life for the average person. Did ordinary Egyptians have their own ways of worship, or were they sort of excluded from directly connecting with the gods?
Oh, far from it. The Greek historian Herodotus, visiting in the 5th century BC, famously observed that Egyptians were religious beyond measure, more so than any other people he knew.
So religion was everywhere.
Absolutely. While the formal state cults were primarily managed by the king and the priesthood elite, we actually know a fair amount about popular everyday religion. Homes, for example, especially like those excavated at the workers' village of Deir el-Medina.
Where the tomb builders lived.
Exactly. Those homes often had special niches built into the walls for displaying images of deceased relatives. Ancestor veneration was important, and also household deities.
Which ones were popular at home?
The most common were Bes, the protective dwarf god, and Teret, the pregnant hippopotamus goddess. Both offered protection against evil forces, especially shielding children and pregnant women during the dangers of childbirth. So there was definitely a deeply personal, intimate dimension to their faith right in the home.
That makes sense. And what about personal prayer? Was there a sense that an individual's prayers could actually be heard by a god even outside the big temples?
Yes, very much so. Especially from the New Kingdom onwards, we see a rise in what scholars call personal piety. One fascinating manifestation of this are the ear stelae.
Ear stelae, stone ears.
Literally. Small stone slabs carved or painted with depictions of multiple large human ears. These were set up in temples or shrines, serving as symbolic listening devices to ensure prayers whispered before them were definitely heard by the god.
Wow, that's direct.
It points to a deep level of personal faith and a desire for direct connection, extending well beyond just, superstition or formal ritual. The cult of Isis, particularly in later periods, grew immensely popular precisely because she was seen as a compassionate goddess who fostered a personal relationship with her followers and offered them salvation. It really makes you think about how adaptable belief systems can be to meet individual needs, doesn't it?
It really does. Now, this leads us naturally to the king, the pharaoh. You mentioned he was often the intermediary in temple rituals. He was seen as being between gods and men, right? How did the king fit into this intricate divine tapestry?
The king's role is absolutely crucial. After Egypt's unification way back at the beginning of its history, the cult of the living king developed right alongside and intertwined with the cults of local and national deities.
So he was divine himself?
Yes, or at least semi-divine. Kings were routinely depicted on temple walls at the same scale as the gods, which was visually very significant.
Yeah.
And the word Necher, meaning god, was commonly used as an epithet for the living king.
And he had divine parentage.
From the 4th dynasty onwards, the king officially held the title Son of Re, son of the sun god. He was also considered the living manifestation on earth of the falcon god Horus, the rightful heir to the throne. Myths were even developed and popularized, detailing the king's divine conception and birth.
So, theologically, he was essential.
Absolutely essential. The idea was that neither the divine realm nor the human realm could truly function properly without him. He was the linchpin, the divine conduit, whose primary job was to maintain cosmic order, truth, and justice by performing rituals and upholding the relationship between Egypt and its gods.
And some kings were declared fully divine.
Yes. A few, like Amenphis III and the famous Ramesses II, seem to have been officially declared fully divine during their lifetimes. This wasn't automatic, it was almost an honor earned through exceptionally long, successful, and powerful reigns.
So if living kings were divine or semi-divine, what about dead kings? Did they become gods too?
Indeed they did. The pyramid texts, those earliest religious writings we have, inscribed inside royal pyramids of the Old Kingdom, explicitly state that the deceased king is a god upon his death.
Not becomes a god, but is one.
Often, yes, the phrasing is quite direct. He is Osiris, ruler of the dead, or he is Re, joining the sun god in his solar bark. The texts often stress his newfound power and even his ascendancy over other deities.
So kingship itself was divine.
Deeply intertwined.
Yeah.
Attributes of kingship are even ascribed to many of the major Egyptian deities themselves. Gods are often shown sitting on thrones wearing royal crowns like the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt or the Uraeus cobra emblem on their foreheads. It just illustrates how deeply interconnected the concepts of kingship and the divine truly were in the Egyptian worldview.
And I think you mentioned earlier, incredibly, there were even deified commoners. That seems remarkable given the unique divine status of the kings.
It truly is remarkable, and it shows another layer of flexibility in their concept of divinity. There are many, but two notable examples stand out.
Who were they?
One was Amenphis, son of Hapu. He was a very high-ranking official, an architect and scribe under King Amenphis III in the New Kingdom.
Okay.
The other, perhaps even more famous, is Imhotep. He was the legendary architect, physician, and vizier of King Djoserel back in the Third Dynasty. The genius credited with designing the step pyramid at Saqqara.
Imhotep, right, associated with medicine.
Exactly. Both Amenphis, son of Hapu, and Imhotep were eventually deified long after their deaths, primarily revered for their immense wisdom and, especially in Imhotep's case, their healing powers. Imhotep in particular received an unparalleled level of widespread veneration in later periods, almost becoming a patron saint of healing and knowledge with temples dedicated to him. It shows that exceptional human achievement, particularly wisdom, could sometimes elevate individuals to divine status.
We've talked about the incredible flexibility of Egyptian deities, their varied forms, their sometimes ambivalent personalities, how they combine through syncretism, and even their surprising mortality. So let's maybe put some faces or masks to these ideas. Who were some of these key figures, and how do they really embody what we've just discussed?
Okay, yeah, it's hard to pick just a few from a pantheon that numbered in the hundreds, maybe thousands if you count minor local figures. But let's highlight some really key deities that illustrate these points well.
Great.
First, you absolutely have to mention Osiris.
The god of the underworld.
Perhaps the most famous underworld deity, yes.
Yeah.
Usually depicted as a mummified human figure, often with green or black skin symbolizing resurrection and the fertile earth, and wearing the distinctive white Etef crown with plumes. His story directly embodies that surprising mortality of the gods we talked about. He was slain, mummified, buried.
Yet reborn.
It's exactly. Reborn as the ruler of the afterlife. He also had a very complex and important relationship with the sun god Re. Sometimes they were seen as complementary forces, maybe Osiris as the body or the night form of Re, representing this powerful fusion of enduring life and the eternal cycle, Nehe. His cult, especially when linked with his devoted wife Isis, offered a powerful promise of personal salvation and resurrection, making it hugely popular.
Okay, Osiris. Who else embodies that complexity?
Well, Seth is a fantastic example of ambivalence.
Osiris's brother and murderer.
The very same. God of the desert, storms, foreigners, and chaos. Often portrayed as violent, ill-tempered, personifying confusion and disruption. He's the antagonist who murdered Osiris.
Doesn't sound very positive.
Yet paradoxically, he also represented immense raw strength and power. This strength was sometimes utilized by kings in battle imagery. The king smashing enemies like Seth smashes chaos. And even the gods relied on him. In the nightly journey through the underworld, it was Seth who stood at the prow of Re's solar bark, defending it by spearing the great chaos serpent Apophis.
So destructive and protective.
Exactly. A perfect illustration of that ambivalent nature. His unique iconography, the strange Seth animal with its curved snout, tall, square-topped ears and erect, arrow-like tail, is immediately recognizable and unlike any real creature.
Okay, Seth. What about a major goddess?
You have to talk about Isis.
Wife of Osiris, mother of Horus.
Yes. Though her precise origins are a bit obscure, Isis became arguably Egypt's most important and universally worshipped goddesses in later periods. She was incredibly adaptable, merging with many other goddesses, most notably Hathor, taking on many of her attributes like the cow horns and sun disk headdress.
And her main story.
Her most important mythological role was as the devoted, grieving wife of Osiris and the fiercely protective mother of their son, Horus. The stories tell of her searching for Osiris's body, reassembling it, and magically conceiving Horus, whom she then hid and raised in the secret marshes of the Delta to protect him from Seth.
A powerful mother figure.
Immensely powerful. She also gained a reputation for magic and healing, famously learning Re's secret name to cure him of a snake bite, thereby gaining power over him. Her cult, emphasizing her loyalty, compassion, and offering that promise of personal salvation and rebirth through her connection to Osiris, became a hugely popular mystery religion that spread throughout the Greco-Roman world. Her worship continued at the Temple of Philae until well into the 6th century AD, long after Egypt became Christianized.
Wow. Isis. Okay, maybe one or two more key players.
Let's touch on Amun. We mentioned him before. He started as a local Theban god, one of the Ogdoad perhaps, but rose to national prominence during the New Kingdom, becoming king of the gods.
Amun-Ra, often.
Often syncretized with the sun god as Amun-Ra, yes. He was famously called Amun, rich in names, embodying that principle of multiplicity and syncretism we discussed. He was seen as a powerful creator god, sometimes creating through the power of thought or his authoritative word, and also as a formidable war god, credited with granting military victories to the pharaohs.
And his forms.
He could be fully anthropomorphic, often shown wearing a tall, double-plumed crown. Or he could appear in animal form as a ram with curved horns, or sometimes a goose, less commonly a serpent or a lion. His main cult center, the Karnak temple complex at Thebes, is just colossal, one of the largest religious complexes ever built.
Karnak, incredible place. Okay, one last one maybe. Something representing creation.
How about Khepri, the scarab beetle god?
The beetle rolling the sun.
That's the image. Khepri represents the sun disk itself, specifically as it rises on the eastern horizon at dawn. His very name comes from the Egyptian verb kheper, meaning to develop, to come into being, or to transform.
Why a beetle?
It reflects the beetle's observed habit of rolling a large ball of dung across the ground, which the Egyptians saw as analogous to pushing the sun disk across the sky. Also, young beetles seem to spontaneously emerge from this dung ball, reinforcing the idea of self-creation and spontaneous generation.
So a symbol of sunrise and rebirth.
Exactly. He was the god of the first sunrise, the embodiment of creation and transformation, often linked with the creator god Atum, representing the sun at different times of day. Khepri morning, or midday, Atum evening. And amulets shaped like scarab beetles, often inscribed on the bottom, were incredibly popular throughout Egyptian history, worn as symbols of creation, protection, and resurrection.
Khepri, Osiris, Isis, Seth, Amun. It gives you a real sense of the diversity and complexity. Now, thinking beyond Egypt itself, it's incredible to consider how these ancient beliefs continued to echo through time, influencing cultures far beyond Egypt's borders.
It really is quite remarkable. Long before the final end of ancient Egyptian civilization as a distinct entity, Egypt exerted enormous cultural and religious influence across the ancient Mediterranean and Near East.
How far did it spread?
We find evidence of Egyptian deities or Egyptian influence on local deities as far afield as Persia in the east and even Roman Britain in the west. The Minoan civilization on Crete, for example, clearly absorbed the protective hippo goddess Tyret into their own religious iconography.
And Bes, the dwarf god.
The image of Bes, that apotropaic protective figure, spread very widely. He turns up all over the place. Roman legionaries even carried images of Bes and sometimes Isis as protective talismans.
That's amazing. And the phoenix, that classic symbol of rebirth that came from Egypt too.
Yes, almost certainly. The Egyptian Bennu bird, a heron-like creature associated with the sun gods Atum and Re, particularly with the primordial mound of creation at Heliopolis, was believed to regenerate itself, to constantly rise anew, often from flames in later traditions. This Bennu bird became the direct prototype for the Greek phoenix, and that powerful symbol of cyclical death and rebirth appealed greatly to early Christians, who readily adopted it as an allegory for the resurrection of Christ. It's a very clear thread connecting ancient Egypt to later Western traditions.
It truly seems like Egyptian religion, perhaps more than people realize, profoundly influenced early Christianity. Can you give us a few more striking examples of that?
Well, it's a fascinating case study in how old beliefs and images can provide fertile ground, maybe the seeds, for new religious ideas. You can argue, as some have, that the very concept of monotheism, or at least a highly transcendent supreme deity as pushed by Akhenaten, laid some groundwork traceable to Egyptian beginnings.
And visually, in Christian art.
Christian iconography seems particularly affected. Think about the traditional symbols of the four evangelists. Matthew is a man, Mark a lion, Luke an ox, John an eagle. In some early Christian art, they were depicted in animal or even animal-headed forms.
Really? Like Egyptian gods?
The similarity is certainly striking, reminiscent of figures like Horus, falcon, Sekhmet, lioness, or Hathor cow. Whether it's direct influence or tapping into a shared symbolic language is debated, but the resonance is there. Even the familiar motif of St. George slaying the dragon may find a precursor in Egyptian temple art, like at the Ibis temple in the Karga Oasis, where you see the god Horus, or sometimes Seth in his positive aspect, depicted spearing the chaos serpent Apophis.
Wow. Slaying the serpent of chaos.
Exactly. And arguably the most iconic Christian image of all.
The mother and child, Mary and Jesus.
Absolutely. The countless images produced over centuries in Egypt showing the goddess Isis, whom the Egyptians themselves called Mut-Necher, which literally translates as Mother of God, nursing her infant son Horus. Well, the visual and thematic parallels to later depictions of the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus are undeniable. Many scholars see this as a profound foreshadowing or direct iconographic influence.
Mother of God. That's striking.
It is. Even the symbol of the cross, particularly the equal-armed Greek cross or the Tau cross, shaped like a T, is first attested in Egypt. The Tau cross seems related to the form of the Ankh hieroglyph, the ancient symbol for life, and possibly even depictions of Christian hell. Egyptian funerary texts, the so-called underworld books painted on tomb walls, contain incredibly vivid and often gruesome depictions of the damned suffering various torments in the afterlife, being burned, decapitated, boiled in cauldrons. It's certainly plausible that these images influenced later Christian iconography of hellfire and damnation. The influence of Egyptian deities, myths, and religious ideas during the formative periods of later religions like Judaism and Christianity, and even Greek philosophy, is really undeniable when you start looking closely.
What an absolutely incredible journey through the spiritual world of ancient Egypt. From shape-shifting deities and these complex, sometimes conflicting creation myths, to the startling idea of the god's own mortality, and then their profound, lasting impact on subsequent religions. It's clear this deep dive truly lived up to its name.
The ancient Egyptians really did create a belief system of remarkable depth, sophistication, and enduring power. It's one that I think continues to challenge our own assumptions about divinity, the cycles of life and death, and maybe even our place in the cosmos.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you reflect on everything we've discussed today, maybe ask yourself, what ancient echoes, what fragments of these Egyptian ideas about the divine might still be shaping our own understanding, our own cultures, even today? Perhaps in ways we don't even consciously recognize.
Something definitely worth pondering.
Indeed. Something to ponder until our next deep dive.